No contemplating, revenge is waiting.
Hello and welcome to our fourth podcast. This one is called DRAGGIN Coffins. We're going to talk about Gothic images in Western movies. I'm joined for this podcast by Kevin Lyons, a horror movie expert, a Gothic film expert, the editor of the Encyclopedia of Fantastic Film and Television. That's EOFFTV.com. And so we're going to crack on, discuss some of the most interesting Western titles, which make great use of Gothic images and atmospheres within the movie. For the first one, we're going to look at Sergio Corbucci's 1966 seminal spaghetti western, Django.
A century ago, on the low hills along the border between the southern states and turbulent Mexico, a mystery man appeared. A man with a sad, impenetrable face.
Django! Django, have you never loved again? Love will live on, life must go on, for you cannot spend your life regretting. Django! Django!
Who was that man? What was his secret?
It's not important. And if I bothered you, will you accept my apology?
He was pitiless in revenge, quick to decide and a master of every weapon. A man everybody would like to have seen dead.
Yeah, his name is Django.
Django, the title of a film you'll never forget. Django.
How many men you got left? You tongue-tied? Or don't want to tell me?
Too bad, Maria. Django, an audacious man of action, capable of a tender, hopeless love, which could only last a day, but a day which was worth all eternity.
I'm glad I made you feel like a real woman. Very glad. I mean that.
Django.
In Django, probably most of you know the movie already, back to front. Incredibly popular film. The film is about, of course, the title character Django, who's an enigmatic ex-Union soldier who arrives at a wretched town in the middle of brewing antagonism between a bunch of red-hooded white supremacists and Mexican bandits. It's become incredibly well known because of the extreme violence, which in 1966, of course, was incredibly shocking. It's a film that means a great deal to me because it was the first spaghetti western maybe that I saw on the big screen. I saw it at the Scala Cinema, I believe on a double bill with Django the Bastard, which is a film we covered in our first podcast about horror films. Django the Bastard being an incredibly Gothic spaghetti western as well. So I think it's a wonderful film. It's probably the best realized of Sergio Corbucci's mid-60s output. What do you think of Django, Kevin?
I can only echo what you said. I think he's magnificent. I think, you know, there's very little left to say about it, but even just hyperbole at this point. He's just so good. Now, outside the Sergio Leone films, it is the quintessential spaghetti western. And I think its star, Franco Nero, is arguably, I would say, the quintessential Italian Western hero, even possibly more so than Clint Eastwood. I think there's, that image of the avenging angel, the lonely, tragic. We're going to see a lot of this during this podcast. This lonely, tragic figure, this avenging angel that sort of appears out of nowhere. And I think he sort of, if he didn't quite create that character, he certainly perfected it. And he's magnificent in this film. Absolutely wonderful.
Oh, yes. I mean, he's incredibly, obviously, he's very stone-faced, but it was the film that launched his career. He debated whether he should even have done it, and he ended up doing it, and he became a huge star in Italy. And I mean, within a year, he was off making Camelot, falling in love, and being an international movie actor. But staying on topic, of course, which is what we've got to do. Gothic touches. You see, for me, this is a film that is full of death imagery. It starts with a man dressed in black dragging a coffin through a mud bath, and it finishes in the most rickety-rackety graveyard that would sit perfectly within a Mario Bava film or something.
Oh yeah.
Like that. Absolutely.
And you've got those red hooded villains as well, which look like they came straight out of an Italian Gothic film as well. So, and this chock full of Gothic imagery. You've even got a little touch of sadoeroticism with a whipping scene and all the rest. All things that we associate with the Gothic.
It's a whipping scene to be proud of.
Oh, definitely. Yes. We see a few of those in this episode. We see quite a lot of mud in this episode, which seems to be a particular hallmark of the Gothic Western. It's set in the mud. But so it will often be set in places which are kind of other, which are sort of kind of liminal spaces. They're not real. They seem almost dreamlike, and that's what I think you get in Django a little bit. He turns up in this town. Like you say, there's a cemetery at the end, which seems to have wandered in from a Mario Bava film. These are all very unreal places. They're almost sort of on the edges of reality, almost. Yeah,
I agree, and it's a completely different look to Leone's films. I mean, obviously Leone's films were absolutely. I mean, only superlatives will do when you discuss them. But of course, those films had a very, very sort of crystal look to them, very sort of blue skies, yellow sand. They looked like like westerns, whereas Corbucci is putting something else.
That's right.
He's creating a dystopian, infernal West for his characters to move around in, and he carries it through a few more of his films.
That's right. Yes.
But that particular period, Django being the pinnacle of it.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
And of course it led to, I mean, how many films were eventually called Django the something, or Django did something, or go and do something with Django, or whatever? I mean, it's over 30 of them, I think.
It depends which country you live in. It depends. In Germany, everything was Django. There's one or two direct sequels. There are films that use the atmosphere. There are films where Django is basically a bloke who works in a bar or something. Sometimes Django really isn't at all outstanding in any way whatsoever. But it sold the movies. It sold the movies.
It's film that just that one word, Django, became synonymous with a particular kind of Italian Western. Just a single word, Django.
Yeah. Got bums on seats. That's the point. That's the point of it.
Absolutely. That was always the main points. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So the second film we're going to look at is it's directed by Antonio Margheriti, who is no stranger to horror films or Gothic cinema in any way whatsoever. It's a film called Vengeance, and it was released in 1968.
Also los, Ricky. Wir zerlegen dich in mindestens 5 Teile, wenn du nicht redest.
Nun mach schon. Wo hat sich Rocco verkrochen?
Ich beerdige die Toten. Ich habe Dauerauftrag von Laredo.
Das muss ja ein florierendes Geschäft sein.
Hey, Sheriff!
Hörst du mich? Sheriff! Lass die Lady raus! Weißt du eigentlich, dass es normalerweise schon tödlich ist, wenn man mir keine Antwort gibt?
In Vengeance, our hero Yoko is who's played by the beefy Richard Harrison, is hunting down a gang who's responsible for drawing and quartering his friend Richie after a bank robbery. It's quite a muscular western. It's quite a brawny sort of western. Richard Harrison is good in this western. It's one of his best. What makes it different to the run-of-the-mill westerns and more interesting for the viewer, especially for us, are the Gothic touches in it. So, for instance, you've got the drawing and quartering of his friend.
Yeah.
Each act of vengeance that he executes, he marks with the bloodied ropes that were tied around his friend as he was pulled apart in a mud bath. So we've got another mud bath
again, isn't it? Yeah.
And there's also the famous final sequence, which is set in a cave complex, almost like a lair for for the villain, who's played by Claudio Camasso, Jan Maria Volante's brother, who plays it almost like a 19th century gravedigger, or even like a Mr. Hyde type of character.
Yeah. He's quite monstrous, isn't he, in his own way? He's
perverse.
Particularly when he's got that white makeup and he's running through the caves with his white clothing flapping behind. He looks ghostly. I mean, literally ghostly, with that sort of flapping clothes going behind him, and he's howling in anger and pain, and he's quite a monstrous figure. But by the end of the film, I think it's actually, to be honest, I think it's stopped being a western by the time they get to the cave, and it has tipped over into a full-blown horror film. They just happen to be wearing western, I think, And Margheriti, of course, had form in the genre, as you said. So he does those scenes remarkably well at the end. They're very atmospheric.
Yeah, did Margheriti direct, was it Castle of Blood with Barbara Steele?
Right, yeah.
And was it Web of the Spider?
Yeah, he did a lot of horror films in his career. Later on he got to the whole gore thing. So he was no stranger to the genre. But Vengeance is the one, I think, where, well, he did too. We'll talk about another one in a minute, but he does actually bring horror and the western together really quite effectively in this one, I think.
Yes.
It's more like a horror film than a western towards the end. I'm
also quite keen on Richard Harrison's sort of outfit, that sort of stitched leather tunic. Yeah. And also, if you notice, Harrison also, he seems to change costume from one shot to the next. That does happen in the film, but he wears a cape at one point while he's riding, and of course Claudio Camasso's character wears a cape as well, and they almost, in the end, they are almost double each other, like a Jekyll and Hyde type of thing.
And there is a concept in the whole sort of area of Gothic, this whole idea of mirroring, that you'll have, so the characters will have they're the opposite sides of the same coin. They're the good and the bad, but essentially they're the same person. And that's quite a widespread concept in the Gothic.
Yes. No, that's it occurred to me, watching it around this time, of course, with that in mind, that sort of occurred to me. And they're similar stature, and but obviously Harrison was probably a bigger guy because he was in in Peplums. But yeah, it's an enjoyable film. Some of the scenes are a bit protracted. Joko, our lead character, revealing that he's half Indian, seems to have no bearing on the plot, but there's a big deal made out of that. There isn't a great deal made out of it, apart from a racial slur, perhaps. But yeah, it's good fun.
Barroom Brawl as well. There's a really well done Barroom Brawl where you actually get the boot's eye view of a particular.
The Spurs eye view in the face.
You really
I know. Yeah. It's that little extra touch of strange and unusual violence that these films have.
Marvelous.
Yes. Right. So on to our third movie again. It's Margheriti. This one has got a great title, And God Said to Cain, and it was released in 1970.
Haben Sie richtig. Ich habe das Zuchthaus im Blut. 10 Jahre im Steinbruch, da meißelt sich jeder Schlag mit der Spitzhacke ins Hirn. Jeder Tropfen Schweiß brennt für ewig auf der Haut. Brennt und das Gefühl der Rache wird größer und größer. 10 Jahre lang, 10 unendliche Jahre, und die Rache wartet darauf, freigelassen zu werden. Und jetzt ist sie frei und hat zum ersten Mal zugeschlagen. Jim ist tot. Und seine Brüder werden wie er sterben. Ob es das Gesetz erlaubt oder nicht, ich werde meine Rechnung nach 10 Jahren präsentieren. Und diese Rechnung kassieren. Ich habe im Steinbruch genau Buch geführt. Was jetzt kommt, ist nur noch die Bilanz. Bilanz für jeden Monat meines Lebens, den ich bei mir abgebucht habe.
Maybe one day you'll find your freedom and you'll cross the mountains high, and you will cross the deep wide river of temptation. There's liberation from all the trials and woes, from blood and
The plot involves a character called Gary Hamilton, who's played by the great Klaus Kinski, who's released from hard labor and on a dark and stormy night exacts revenge on Akambar, the man who was responsible for his incarceration. So the first scene doesn't really give you a lot of clues that it's going to become one of the most complete Gothic westerns that was ever made, certainly in Italy. We just see guys chipping at rocks in a quarry, basically like prison scene. I think does he not smash a snake in with a mallet or something like that? Kicks things off. And he's pardoned, released, and goes back to the town where Akambar lives. And as the storm clouds are growing, he starts to use underground tunnels, it's an Indian burial ground.
That's right.
To scuttle about and take out Akambar's henchmen one by one. And it's a great atmosphere. Kinski's magnificent.
I think you put Kinski in a film and you automatically up your Gothic quotient by several points, I think. I mean, you just got that haunted, slightly desiccated look of a man who's probably just come back from the dead, to be honest. And he always had that look. He always looked haunted. He always looks slightly unwell. I mean, he's the ultimate sort of European Gothic hero for me. You know, he really is.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, our erstwhile colleague, Kevin Grant, who can't be with us this evening, he actually wrote about this in his book, Any Gun Can Play. And he said of the film, and I think he summed it up quite nicely, he said it's an intoxicating combination of Western and horror motifs that fully exploits the inherent menace of Klaus Kinski. The remorseless way in which Kinski's Gary Hamilton stalks and terrorizes his enemies is almost identical to Anthony Steffen's methods in Django the Bastard, while Kinski's pallor and hypnotizing stare give him the appearance of a vengeful wraith. These are the most fearsome avengers of all. They seem to exist solely for this purpose.
Oh, this was like having him here. It's like having...
Eerie, isn't it? Eerie, my impression
it
of
was,
it.
It was like having Mr. Grant here. That was fantastic. But yes, that's correct.
I think you have the nail on the head there.
And there's that great scene where he appears silhouetted on the top of a hill. And as
a lot of them in these films, a lot of the heroes in these films, as I said, they're kind of avenging angels. They're kind of that lonely, tragic hero figure. But there's always a little hint, sometimes very little hint, but it's always there of maybe they're supernatural. Maybe they are. Maybe they are demonic. Maybe they're not human. There's something otherworldly about these. And it's sometimes very subtle, but I think in this one, you know, you look at him and you think, yeah, there's definitely an aura of the supernatural about this man.
Oh, definitely, yes, yeah. Certainly, I mean, there are theories about the film that perhaps he isn't alive, but no, I mean, there's other little Gothic things, aren't there? Like the strange family with a secret.
That's right. Yes.
You know, and there's a room full of mirrors distorting the vision a little bit. Again, it's a bit like Lady from Shanghai.
But again, that mirroring thing that the Gothic likes. So yeah, I mean, they're literal in this case, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
It's all there. It's all there if you look for it. It's a very, very Gothic Western. As you said, the most Gothic.
Yeah. It's a highly recommended, and it's a well-liked spaghetti Western as well. Yeah, it's a very popular one.
Great film.
Okay, so the next film we're going to look at is we're going to go to American films now, and this one is a 1971 film directed by Don Siegel, and it's starring Clint Eastwood. It's The Beguiled.
A refuge or a hell, as Clint Eastwood, wounded Yankee, is brought to an all-girls school to become the prisoner of these man-deprived women, these man-eager girls.
You must be tired. Wouldn't you like a chance to go to your closet? I might sponge parts of him. You wouldn't.
You are not our guest. If you get any ideas of trying to amuse yourself with any of the ladies in this house,
wait
you'll
just a
find
minute.
yourself out on that road so fast you won't know what happened to you.
Consider the possibilities. Is he a helpless victim to be threatened, teased, enticed, loved at their will and pleasure?
What do you want?
I love you.
Or is he a man, aggressive, wooing, demanding, who must love to stay alive?
I want to take your brother's place, but I must warn you, it won't always be easy to act like a brother.
Hold it, Yank!
Clint Eastwood, man, the symbol, the sexual enemy.
I'm gonna have the run of this place. One is I'm gonna be with any young lady that desires my company.
Geraldine Page, possessive, vindictive.
Just because I didn't go to your bed.
Elizabeth Hartman, her passion latent and violent.
Okay, so in The Beguiled, Clint Eastwood plays John McBurney, who's a Union soldier, wounded in battle, who's rescued, taken by residents of a Southern girls' school to recover before being handed over as a prisoner of war. But while he's there, McBurney decides to seduce and manipulate the ladies who reside within the school. It's a stunning film. It's an absolutely brilliant film, and probably the creepiest of all of these.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's not, I've always thought of it as a horror film. It never occurred to me it wasn't a horror film. It most definitely is. You know, you got Clint Eastwood playing almost defiantly against type. You know, he had morally ambiguous characters before, but this guy is repulsive. I mean, he's really horrible. The first thing he tries to do is tries to kiss an underage girl, and then spends the rest of the film manipulating every woman he comes across. He's thoroughly unpleasant. And it was quite a brave move, I think, for Eastwood, so much so that they didn't really know how to market the film. If you look at the original poster of it, you know, it's a traditional pose, you know, Clint's gun in hand, all the rest of it, making it look like an action film. And it's nothing like that at all. He plays a very weak character, morally weak character, who just manipulates everybody in sight. And a horrible man, a brilliant performance.
It is, yeah. And like you say, that sort of initial meeting with one of the girls from the school, she's a child, and he, like you say, he tries to kiss, well, he does kiss a child, and it's Clint Eastwood. He's our hero, you know. The same year he makes Dirty Harry, which is like where they lionize his machismo, and in The Beguiled, they're basically building up this machismo only to try and destroy it.
He doesn't settle such right from the start, doesn't it? Because when we see him do that, we immediately know that we can't trust him, yet he's supposed to be the hero of the film. So we're already on edge right from the very start, and we never quite know where he's going with this behavior.
Yeah, and it's visually it's very interesting. I mean, he's in the school. It's a very sort of it's a bit of a dark old house film. It's many scenes are gaslit, so it has that sort of visual look to it. The women, to a certain extent, come across a little like a coven of witches.
Yes.
By the end of it. So on the one hand, it's a film about a misogynist man who has to face his crimes, but on the other hand, it's a film about jealous, angry women. So is it a misogynist film, or is it a film about misogynist?
It's a difficult question to answer. I'm not entirely sure we're qualified to answer that, to be perfectly honest. We're the wrong people to be answering that. But yes, he has been accused of misogyny. But I think that the women's roles in it are actually really well drawn. I mean, there's some really interesting characters in it. They're not like Clint Eastwood's character. They're not entirely black and white.
No, they're not.
Moral ambiguity about all, you know, it's you know, I'm in grave danger of trying to justify the film here. And like I say, I don't think we're the right people to be doing that. But I would say that, yes, I think the women characters are actually really well drawn in it. Unusually so for a film of this kind.
Yes, there's some really good performances, and with the women, there's obviously an interesting character, of course, who is the house slave.
Yes.
Who is the strongest
character?
Course, when it comes to Clint Eastwood's character, she's the one who puts him in his place.
Yeah, she sees right through him, and she's not taking any of his BS at all. So
she's the one who is absolutely has everyone sussed out, and it's
of course.
That's quite a strong statement to make, I think.
It's a more nuanced film than I think some of its critics will give it credit for. I think there's a lot more going on. It's easy to take a sort of knee-jerk reaction to it because it is unpleasant. There is a lot of stuff in there that does make you wince, and I think probably did at the time, and I think was meant to make you wince. Yeah, so it's easy to have a knee-jerk reaction and go, oh no, I don't like that, But I think if you sort of look at the nuances of it, there's more going on in it than meets the eye.
Oh, it's a film about emasculation. It makes you wince.
Yes. Yeah. Well, he does actually say at one point, doesn't he? Why didn't you just castrate me?
Yes.
It's,
yeah.
So it's clear what was on their minds when they were making it.
Yes. Yeah. And of course, I mean, going back to the Gothic atmosphere, it's this whole southern atmosphere with is it the Spanish moss and the trees and
when I was watching it, I was thinking the world is in chaos outside this school. Inside the school there's this sort of hotbed of sexual tension going on, but outside it's the civil war, and it's horrific outside. And the sort of border between the inside of the school and the outside of the school is this Spanish moss which cascades down from the trees and makes it look a little bit like the world is melting. It's a very strange. It's really well done. Bruce Surtees was the cinematographer. It was the first film he made with Eastwood, and they went on to do a lot of films together. And he captures that brilliantly. He's got that really weird sort of like the whole world seems to be dripping around the edges as they go out of They don't go out of the school very often, but when they do, it's a very strange world out there.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And of course, it's a poisonous world, but that's.
There you are. Yes.
Of course, for viewers to watch, because it's a great film. I mean, anyone who's a Clint fan and hasn't seen The Beguiled has to get hold of it and watch it.
Stop listening to this. Go and watch it now. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Definitely. Yes. Well, give us a bit. Right. So we're moving back to Italy, who they seem to have a real penchant for the Gothic look in their some of their Western movies, and quite a lot of them. I mean, we certainly haven't covered all of them here. A lot of Italian Westerns have got bits and pieces of Gothic atmosphere or Gothic visuals in them. But I'm going to look at these two Westerns that from the mid-70s. So we're talking about the dying days of this, the spaghetti Western boom. The next film we're going to look at is Enzo G. Castellari's 1976 film, Keoma.
Come on in. You've been gone quite a while this time. Where you been?
Fighting a war.
Meet anybody faster than you?
Not yet.
He shot Ben and Charlie without even turning around.
Ain't no man can hit a target without looking at it.
There are two men who can't. Now, Paul is one, and the other is...
This land belongs to Mr. Caldwell, along with everything that's on it. You had to pay for the water, and now you gotta pay for the medicine.
I'll pay this time.
How much you willing to pay?
4 cents. The price of 4 bullets. 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Why are you helping us?
When you've been away so long, your memories won't let you forget the debts that have to be paid.
Don't try to help us. We're already dead.
But you're still afraid. That hasn't changed that.
Who are you doing it for?
For myself, maybe.
Why'd you come back?
The world keeps going around and around. So you always end up in the same place.
Around you all, around you tears have no right to cry. The pain you see, the pain you feel, the wrong you do.
Keoma,
can't do it alone.
I have to do it alone. Because I am alone.
Now you've done what you had. You've done even more than you could do. Stop your fighting, fight yourself now. When there's you must leave.
Aren't you tired of killing?
I have to survive.
Now to take your life away. No, I won't this time.
Keanu returns from the Civil War to his father's home, only to find that the town that he lived in is being ravaged by plague and is presided over by Caldwell, played by Donald O'Brien, and Keoma's jealous brothers. Keoma's also protecting a pregnant woman, while events are watched by an older woman credited simply as the witch.
Witch, yes.
So this is a real favorite of mine. I mean, of all the late spaghetti westerns, this is the one that probably does it for me the most. We start immediately with a Gothic scene. We've got a dust-blown ghost town, doors rattling in the wind. Keoma with his long hair and duster and strange pointy hat turns up, and there's the old lady scrabbling around in the dirt. The witch. I mean, whether she's a real witch or just a lady, but she seems to view things from a distance, or she seems to be watching events.
There are hints that she has supernatural power. She seems to be able to foresee the future, and it's cleverly staged so it could be a hallucination, but she does seem to transform into Lisa at one point. So was that just Keoma hallucinating at that point, or did that really happen? So you've got that kind of, not quite sure whether she's real or not. You know, he sees Lisa standing in front of him, and then in an instant, she's suddenly the witch.
Oh,
and
right.
It's very much, again, going back to that mirroring thing. And, you know, I think the two women in the film, Lisa represents life because she's pregnant, she's going to give birth at any second. And the witch is right at the end of her life. She represents death. These are the two forces that are driving Keoma on throughout the film.
Yes, yeah. I mean, in itself, it's a meaty Western.
Oh, yeah.
Again, it's Franco Nero. We've got Franco Nero's last great spaghetti Western role there. He's absolutely magnificent. I mean, he's full of emotion in this one, far more than in Django. But he's quite similar to Django in that slightly supernatural touch. No one is faster than him with a gun. He seems to be able to shoot people behind his head, like Django. Loads of great visuals in the scenes. There's also this. Sorry, go on.
Do you think, like me, that do you remember the goth band Fields of the Nephilim?
I am not as familiar with goth rock as you are.
Look up. Yeah, old hippie, old goth. You wouldn't know from the hair, but yes, I am. But yes, go and look up pictures of Fields of the Nephilim and tell me that they didn't take their look almost directly from Keoma.
Very possible. I do know the image. The image. And they're the guys with the dusters, though, aren't with the long coats?
Yes. And they look remarkably like the character of Keoma. So I reckon it was a huge influence, you know, maybe not on the film world as much, because as you say, these were the twilight days of the spaghetti Western, but certainly on the music, I think it had quite an impact.
Yes. On the subject of music, do you like the soundtrack to Keoma?
It's a very odd one, isn't it?
It's curious.
Yeah, and it's one of those. Well, it's kind of like a sort of very weird Greek chorus where it's kind of telling us what we're seeing happening
I know.
on the screen.
Yeah.
It's like, you do kind of think, why are you telling me this? I can plainly see what's going on. You don't have to sing this at me.
It's true. It's absolutely true. The composers of the DeAngelis brothers.
That's right.
Who otherwise known as Oliver Onions when they're doing soundtracks for Terence Hill and Bud Spencer films.
Yeah.
But this one is very serious, and it's like someone's trying to do a Leonard Cohen impression. Someone's trying to do a Joan Baez impression, but like you say, now I'm riding down the road. Yeah, they're just telling you exactly what's going on.
we see what's going on. You don't have to sing it to them. I mean, they're nice tunes, perhaps, but the male voice. I do wonder if it was one of the DeAngelis brothers. Have we ever found out who it was that actually sang?
I'm afraid that hopefully someone will be able to tell us, but I don't know enough about it.
I've often wondered if it was one of the DeAngelis brothers. It's quite unique, shall we say, voice, isn't it?
It's unique, yes. The other thing that is again another touch is this changing of time within one shot.
Yes.
So he looks at the past. The camera's with the same camera movement. You can see the past, the present, the future. And this is Castellari's direction. He really was on the money in this film.
It's superb, quite disorientating at times, because suddenly he will appear in the past and you think, oh, is this some sort of time travel device? And you think, no, because like you said, the camera turns round and it's kind of a representation of him revisiting the past in his own mind rather than literally, which is a really clever device. You don't see that often in films, and Castellari does it brilliantly, really well. So disorientating when it first happens.
Oh, he's a fine director. I mean, one of all the Italian, of the European Italian directors of action films, he's he's certainly one of the best.
Sure.
Of those films. So a year after Keoma was directed, it's a very similar film, this one, directed by someone who's familiar with horror movies again. This is a man called Blade. It was directed, or at least released, in 1977 and directed by Sergio Martino.
Who are you? Those that know me call me Blade.
Why?
Because I got a habit of letting this do my talking for me. But as you can see, I know other languages.
So hold your soul apart.
These men have got to stick to working and not be distracted with disgusting spectacles of bad along.
No!
Shut up! Go get him, go on. We ain't got any sheriff here. We ain't got nothing. It all belongs to McGowan.
Now, either you all return to work immediately, or I order my men to open fire.
Your wealth can get you anything with a price on it. Men even die for it.
But it can't buy you the one thing you've never had. Human kindness.
Every so often, I think if I had a lot of money, I'd go away and just travel wherever I want to.
And then what? Come back on home?
Hold it! End of the line, friends!
God.
Shut the hardware, grab for a cloud! And no monkey business.
Vala. It's Vala you've got to kill. It's he who kidnapped Deborah. He's a bloodthirsty madman who wants to take over my empire, and I can't prevent it. You can stop him, though. Get me Vala.
To destroy who loves to kill. In your
I know I shouldn't ask you. Will you stay?
Who can tell? Can't bet on covered cards.
You mind telling me just what your real name is?
My name is in the wind, blown over my father's grave.
when the time will come to kill, to destroy who loves to kill. Then your hand won't stop the eye, and your conscience will be satisfied.
Similarly to Keoma, Manaya, who is a man called Blade, played by Maurizio Merli, returns to the town of his childhood, which is a fog-shrouded, dilapidated town, where he ends up being paid to rescue the daughter of his father's killer. And what's clearly fits the bill for this particular show is this constant fog that seems to be swirling round the entire set.
That opening scene is about as gothic as it gets, isn't it? You know, when
yes.
running across the sort of swampland with all the fog, and you've got this phantom rider chasing after him. You know, it doesn't get much more gothic a start to a western than that.
No, and of course his weapon is the axe.
Yeah.
So it almost has a medieval quality.
That's right. Yeah.
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 The costuming he wears as well, this sort of mountain man costume. He's not a traditional looking cowboy.
Sure.
And
you've got a really haunting shot right at the very end, haven't you, when he appears out of the fog, when he's been in that cave for a while, he's been blinded, and he's still determined to get his revenge. Nothing's going to stop him. Nothing stops an avenging angel. That's the whole point of these films, that, you know, they are forces of nature that you cannot stop. And he literally sort of emerges out of the fog to confront the bad guy at the end for the final showdown. It's remarkable. I'm a huge Sergio Martino fan, so I'm somewhat biased here, but I think, you know, he pulls off some really remarkable shots in this film.
He does. And the reason why, I think, allegedly, the reason why he used so much of this fog, basically fog machines, is because he was using the Elios film studios, which were the Roman film studios that were built in the early 60s, and the thing was literally falling apart. So you can see that the whole thing is there's bits of wood all over the floor. So in order to actually get away with using it, that's one of the reasons why he's just enshrouded it in fog to make it.
It works so well. It works so well. I mean, the dilapidated town, which you can just about see through the murk, that really is quite remarkable, isn't it? Yeah.
The other thing I thought, which echoes older Gothic films, is Voller, I believe his name, Voller, John Steiner's character, his two hounds.
Yes, that's right.
So you've got a caped man with two hounds, like Barbara Steele.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
From
I mean, these
Black Sunday.
They knew, you know, this was their heritage. They understood these films totally and completely. And so, of course, they were going to reference them in little ways as they went along, you know?
Yes, yeah. And the villain's particularly odious. I mean, he's awful.
Horrible. I love John Steiner, but oh God, he could play some horrible men, couldn't he? And he's
yes. Yeah. I mean,
awful man in this. It's kind of almost, he's got a little moustache, but it's not quite big enough for him to twirl. He kind of he's got that kind of Victorian Gothic villain sort of feel to him, you know.
Yeah, I mean, he turns up in crime films and a couple of westerns, but yeah, he's really, really great, and I'm sure he's a really nice man.
I'm sure he is. Yeah. But from his films, you wouldn't want to spend too much time from him judging from the films he's made. Yeah,
no.
And you've got a little touch. Kind of nice. You've got that bit where his eyes are pinned open, which kind of foreshadows Opera, Dario Argento's film, which is quite a sort of grim touch, isn't it? With the eyes sort of forced open.
They've done an extra bit with the stick, so they buried him. They buried him up to his neck with a stick, eyes, so he has to stare at the sun, which of course is why he ends up staggering around half blind at the end.
As tortures go, that's one of the nastiest I think I've ever seen in a film.
Yeah, it is cruel and unusual violence, which many of these films seem to have. I mean, we're going back to Django, 1966. We've got the ear.
That's right.
In the mouth. I mean, that's what the hell were they thinking? It was only 1966. Who cuts someone's ear off and puts it in someone's mouth? I tell you who, Mexican bandits do.
Not if you were in Britain, of course, because the censor said absolutely not. And if I remember right,
yes, we did fail to mention this, of course. Django was banned from the UK until I think maybe more or less when we saw it at the Scala.
Very likely, but you look at some of these other films. You look at something like A Man Called Blade, and you do wonder, you know, did that get released here? Because it's so grim. It's so unrelentingly cruel, and and again we've got this sort of undercurrents of sadoeroticism running through it that is quite disturbing, you know. So it's a hallmark of the Italian Gothic Western that they are very, very violent and really quite unsettling and disturbing.
Yes, yeah. But anyway, the last film that we're going to look at, we're going to actually look at an American film now. With these Italian Westerns, I'm sure we can return to these at another time. We could probably find other examples that we could talk about. And we could talk about them forever because so many of them are really great films. So we'll have to have another deeper look and see if we can pull out some more. I'm sure there are other titles. There's certainly those, as I've said already, with scenes that have a Gothic touch, whether they've got that full flavour or not. I don't know.
Very nice, very nice.
So we've got Clint Eastwood again. So Clint Eastwood fans have got a couple of movies here. The last film is Pale Rider.
Warner Brothers will be proud to bring you the next great American Western. Clint Eastwood, Pale Rider. They came out of the mountains to ravage and rape a small mining village. Suddenly, a stranger appeared, and hell followed with him. Some called him preacher. Others called him gunfighter. Clint Eastwood, Pale Rider.
it's an eerie homage to shame. A mysterious preacher helps and protects a community of tin handlers from a fat cat land grabber. So the film starts with these poor people that they're panning for gold. They're not doing so well. They're obviously they're poor, but they've got a makeshift community on the go. And the film begins with them being attacked by this landowner's henchman, his gunman, and it's incredibly violent. Some of them lose their lives, and the daughter of Michael Moriarty's the main actor that we see, the main character of these tin handlers. His daughter goes to pray to the Lord. I think it's the Lord's Prayer. So she says the Lord's Prayer, and as she says it, it's intercut with this mysterious rider, this mysterious preacher. So on the one hand, we may have this sort of spectral character, and on the other hand, we may well have an avenging angel sent by God himself. It's either a ghost story or an incredibly religious movie.
Yes, or both even.
Or both.
Both, yeah.
Yes.
Eastwood himself has said that, the preacher is an out-and-out ghost. He says that, and he was a little bit more ambiguous about High Plains Drifter, which is kind of the spiritual sibling of this film. They're both of a type. He was a lot more sort of ambiguous about whether the character in that was a ghost, whether he was dead or not. In this one, he was quite happy to come out and say, no, he's an out-and-out ghost. And like you say, he's prayed into existence by this young girl who asked for just one miracle, and then he appears. Exactly. And a little bit later on, we get this marvelous scene where he's riding into town for the first time with Michael Moriarty, and the girl is reading from the Bible, and she's reading from the part where they're talking about the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And she reads out the line, "I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him." And as she says the words "a pale horse," Clint's horse comes into shot, and it's a pale horse. And he's Death riding into town on the back of this horse.
Yes.
It has got that real sort of spiritual, sort of very religious undercurrent to it all the way through.
And there's a great deal of time spent by the preacher trying to help them to help themselves.
Yeah. He's not there to do the heavy lifting himself, is he? He's there to show them the way rather than to...
Until such time as it becomes personal.
Yes.
And then he obviously has to address an old ill that was done to him. But that's right. But there are many signs that he's a ghost, like the bullet holes in the back,
which you notice are echoed in the bullets in the back of Marshall at the end of the film when he shoots him. There's virtually the same face, so there's kind of a little bit of foreshadowing, a little bit of mirroring again. So
I forgot what I was going to say there. Oh, there are now we were talking about this compared to High Plains Drifter. Now, High Plains Drifter has these scenes of course, the Clint Eastwood character basically assaulting women. Whereas Pale Rider seems to address this by him dissuading this younger lady girl, to that he's not the man for her. So I'm wondering whether he's trying to address this scene in High Plains Drifter, or whether he's saying no because he's dead.
On the other side of that, just to play devil's advocate for a moment, it is a film in which Clint Eastwood plays a character who's being adored and idolized by a little girl, essentially. And, there is that little bit of sort of like, oh yeah, I'm this sort of macho hero, and of course the girls are going to throw themselves at me. But it's kind of, a nuanced thing. I think, what you're saying probably does have some merit to that. I think there was a little bit, even in the 80s, in the mid-80s, I think there was still that sort of, little girl idolizing the older man. That was the male fantasy. Although I read somewhere, I'm sure I read somewhere, that in the real West, young teenage girls would quite often go off with bandits and gunslingers because it was seen as a better option than the pretty dismal life they were leading in these horrible townships.
And they would marry very young, which is, and there's a great deal made of the fact her mother married when she was 15.
That's right. Yeah,
you know, it's almost enforced within the script that was quite normal within far west communities at the time.
And so again, it's more about the nuance of the film, isn't it? You can read it in so many different ways. If you want to see it as one way, it works. If you want to see it another way, it works as that as well. It's a very cleverly written film.
Yes. And Richard Keel is in it and gets a mallet in the nuts.
Which is always a fantastic moment in any film, really. He should have done more of that in his career, I think. But that is one of the standout moments, isn't it? I saw the film when it first came out in 1985 because it was Clint Eastwood. You just went to see any Clint Eastwood film. Now, I didn't see it for probably a couple of decades after that for whatever reason. And the one thing I remembered about it was poor old Richard Keel taking the mallet to the nuts. That was the only thing I remember. A brilliant film, but that's the one thing I remembered. Which is really rather sad. I think that says more about me than he does about the film, to be fair.
And what's most unusual is it seems to ingratiate himself more towards Clint Eastwood's character. He seems from that point on completely enamoured of like Clint Eastwood's character. You know, it was like, well, I deserved that. It's like I deserved that, and now
to be fair,
I'm with this guy. I'm not with these guys anymore.
Anyway, so I mean, it's Clint Eastwood. I mean, he can do what he likes. You know, come and whack me in the nuts. I still love him. So you know, what do you do? What do you do? He's Clint. I mean, come on, you do what he wants.
But in summary, though, it's a great film. It doesn't necessarily have the full sort of Gothic imagery, but it certainly is. It is a ghost story.
Of course, it's got enough of it. It's got enough of the Gothic touches to warrant its inclusion here, definitely.
Yes, yeah. Anyway, but we've done them all. We've gone through them. Absolutely marvelous.
This time, I mean, we've had some good films in the previous ones, but this is the one where every single film I absolutely loved. There wasn't a duck one amongst this collection. Absolutely wonderful.
Every one of these 7 films is really, really enjoyable. So if you're interested in westerns and you're more to the point interested in interesting westerns, then watch them.
Yeah, use this as your shopping list. You won't go far wrong with this. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back, hopefully, with another podcast with another left field look at the Western genre. I'm Clark Hodgkiss. Thank you very much for joining me. This is Kevin Lyons.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed this immensely. It's been really good fun.
Okay. All right, then. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Revenge is waiting, so keep on riding on. Vengeance.